I think that there's going to be an election next year because uh, minority governments only last 18 months in Canada at the most.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Radical Center podcast. As always, I'm Cody Vatcher, and I'm joined today by Ian Connerty. Ian, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Good to hear. It's starting to get a little cold outside, though. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah, no, it was cold here in Richmond Hill today.
Yeah, I was wearing a sweater all day at work today. But anyways, let's before we get into it, I want to start off by thanking all of our listeners across YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and just about everywhere, because last week was one of our best weeks for viewership since we launched the podcast in November. I don't have to go over what we talked about, but obviously we're going to go a little bit more in depth to some of the things that we talked about last week. So I cannot stress enough. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And on the agenda today, we got a big, impactful show. It might go a little bit longer, but that's okay because all of these are important issues. So Mark Carney traveled over to Europe. We got clean fuel regulation that we're going to talk about. Pierre announces a stand on guard law, which basically like a castle law in Canada that he's proposing. And we're going to talk about new polling for federal, provincial. We had some ministers that went on some expeditions, some field trips, we'll call it, and we're going to talk about that. So our first topic today, we're going to talk about Mark Carney's tour, we'll call it, of Europe. He just wrapped up, I guess, a whirlwind trip, stopping in major capitals like Berlin, Kiev, I think Paris and London as well.
No, not there, but he went to Latvia and Poland.
Okay, I stand corrected. The official goal, I think, was to shore up Canada's relationships with key allies, but I think it was more than a simple diplomatic handshake tour. Ian, what do you think about the Prime Minister's trip overseas?
Well, my first reaction was that it was designed for the home audience. It was a political trip, in my view. When he went to Poland, for example, one of the first things he said was there are 1 million Canadians of Polish descent. And then again, when he went to Kiev, he said there's 1,000,003 Canadians of Ukrainian descent, and it's the largest diaspora in the Western world. Well, who's he talking to, and who's he trying to influence with this travel? I think that there's going to be an election next year because uh, minority governments only last 18 months in Canada at the most, and I think he was reaching out to those 2.3 million voters, and then for the home audience, he got coverage about an LNG program with Germany. Looking at the reality of what they both said over there, was that he was opening discussions on the intent of providing LNG. That's what he said in Germany. But then back in Canada, his spin doctor said, well, we're going to send LNG. No. We can't. We don't have the infrastructure. He talked about building ports. Once he got back to Canada, he talked about building a port in Churchill, Manitoba, and expanding the port of Montreal for LNG. Well, first of all, Montreal is a non-starter because there are no pipelines to get the natural gas through to Montreal to be processed into liquid natural gas and exported from the port of Montreal. Quebec does not want any pipelines. Secondly, there's no pipeline to northern Manitoba. And it's a pretty tough area. You're getting into muskeg by the time you get to northern part of Manitoba. So first they got to build a pipeline up there. And secondly, they got to build a processing plant anywhere near those two locations. Yes, we have a facility in British Columbia for LNG that has recently opened. However, you cannot economically transport LNG from there to Europe. Can't be done. And it would be totally economically unfeasible. So that was the main thing they talked about when they got back. And it turns out not to be a real project. Oh, and then what he did today, I think, they announced an office to expedite these projects. Well, an office is not a project. That's
Yeah,
comments.
yeah, look, I think that if you want to know why Canada continues to be sidelined on the world stage, it's because we go on these virtue signaling expeditions, just like Trudeau did.
Yes,
Carney's continuing that tradition, just without the tendency to play dress up. If you
maybe he
like,
should.
and also the military aspect of it as well. If you take a look at Canada's recent history when it comes to military spending and our commitments to our military alliances, we're just constantly reacting to demands of other countries to step up. And our prime minister is so serious that he flew to a country at war, announced some sort of customs agreement, and then he announced military spending that was already committed to. So,
Yes, they announced
and
it here first. Yeah.
right, and you talk about the bureaucracy that they're going to set up to, again, just signal their intentions. What would have reinforced his message and made our allies realize that Canada is now serious about natural resources and military spending is if Parliament was sitting and at the exact same time there was a bill going through for all of these things that Mark Carney is announcing. Then you can point to the United States and you can point to other countries and say, look, we're not just talking, we're not just signaling an intent. The bill is going through Parliament. And look, I mean, you can elaborate more you want on some of the specifics, but I think what we really have to understand here is that Mark Carney set expectations extremely high
Hmm.
on all of these files, right? He was the only person who can get a deal with Trump, that he could manage an economic crisis, and that's the top reason why Canadians elected him. And I think that he's suffering right now because of those high expectations.
The first political rule that most of them follow is don't over promise, but over deliver. And you're right. Carney, probably because he's new to politics, didn't follow that basic rule. And if you overpromise and you can't deliver, Trump is in the same boat. 2 days he's going to end the war in Europe, in Ukraine. He didn't know the specifics of what was going on there, so he got trapped as well. Now it's 6 months into that war, and he wants to get out. We'll talk about that later. And Carney did the same thing. He overpromised so many things that now that he's faced with the reality of governing, there's going to be backlash, and there already is in the polls we're going to discuss later.
Right. You could talk about Ukraine now if you want to, or the military spending, because I know you got a lot that you want
Yeah,
to talk about.
I going right from the statements that he released while he was over there. They went through the $2 billion initial amount that was announced in Canada, and the total is going to be $4.5 billion for Ukraine for more military hardware. He also commented when he was over there that Canada has committed $22 billion to the Ukraine war, which is more per capita than any other Western country. Now, I didn't realize it was that high, but that 22 billion could be spent in many other ways in Canada. Affordability on many things being one of the biggest problems Canada's facing. But when he's over there, he announced, I was surprised, part of that $2 billion is to buy $100 billion of ammunition from Czechia. Well, wait a minute. And then there's another one that was 675 million to buy military equipment from the United States. What? And then there was 860 million for military hardware from Canada. Well, I don't know of anybody who's building military hardware right now in Canada.
No,
We
and
had
that's why we can only give money for the Ukrainians to buy it elsewhere,
from elsewhere.
or we buy it for them. That's
Yeah.
that's the most insane thing about all this money going to Ukraine is that, we can't even get the military equipment for ourselves.
Well, we can't
Why are we
create jobs or economic activity in Canada. The United States, on the other hand, have sent 300 billion over the 3 years, but a lot of that has created jobs throughout the United States where they create the military armaments and material and then send it over.
Right. That's true. That's right. So let's move on. We're going to talk about it's Mark Carney adjacent, but we're going to, Pierre Poilievre, he won his by election and, now he's back in Atlantic Canada this week. We'll talk about him being in Brampton today.
Yes.
But he's back in Atlantic Canada this week talking about the clean fuel regulation that the government currently has in place. He's really focused on the fact that this regulation, apparently, as time goes on, is going to add the same amount to fuel as the consumer carbon tax. So we're going to take a look right now at Pierre Poilievre and get your reaction on the other side of that.
Here we are today. Mark Carney is bringing back the carbon tax to Carbon Tax 2.0. He calls it the Clean Fuel Standard, Clean Fuel Regulations. According to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, it will add 17 cents a liter to your gas. What did the last carbon tax add to your gas? 17 cents a liter. The new tax is starting to look a lot like the old tax. And Mark Carney thinks no one will notice. Well, conservatives have noticed, and that is why we are announcing today that we are making it a priority to boost take-home pay and reverse the liberal cost of living crisis by opposing Mark Carney's Carbon Tax 2.0. We want to axe all carbon taxes for good, for real, for everyone, forever.
Okay, so there you go. There you have it. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre talking about how he wants to put forward an amendment or a bill to get rid of the carbon tax for good. Ian, what are your thoughts?
Well, first I want to comment on his delivery. I saw him say the same kind of thing at one of his rallies during the election, where he was more like a firebrand Southern preacher. He said basically the same things, but in a much more mellow tone. And when I worked for David Peterson, Peterson's chief of staff used to say, watch the 6 o'clock news without the audio. And that is to get the body language and to get the feel of what that politician is trying to relate to you. And I watched his delivery today, and it wasn't firebrand. It was more relaxing, which is, and Marshall McLuhan once said that for politicians to be on television, they either can be hot or cold, and you have to be cold. You have to be relaxed. You're in somebody's living room. So, it's a bit of a diversion, but I think that's the new Pierre that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and we're seeing it now. Now, as for the substance of what he said, Carney said during the election that he was canceling the carbon tax and he would impose an industrial tax. But he didn't say the obvious. Industries are simply going to pass that on to consumers. So, all these, and that's only the first of the hidden carbon taxes. He also talked about hidden taxes on steel, for example, and said, well, how much steel do you have around your house? Well, wait a minute. Steel's in the cars you buy. It's everywhere. And it's going to be hidden because the guys who manufacture, or the people who manufacture, are simply going to add it on, and we're going to pay for it as consumers.
Right, and I think what you just mentioned too. I mean, I was at a rally too during the election campaign, and he talked about this. Right, he said that the consumer carbon tax, it's still there. It's just zero. It's kind of like the capital gains tax, where the government can decide to collect it whenever it wants, or it can collect it ahead of time,
or change the amount.
Or change the amount or whatever, right? The carbon tax is still on the book. The fact of the matter is that when you force companies to pay a tax, they pass it on to the consumer, right? Yeah. And even when you take that tax off, unless we're in a recession or unless it affects the competitiveness of the company, that tax is going to stay on for good forever. Yeah. So, and it gives Pierre more credibility, because what he's saying is, in his own way, he had to take credit for the carbon tax, the 1.0. But in his own way, what he's saying is, look, I told you guys during the election that this is what's going to happen. And now look what Carney is doing.
The important thing, that just relating to what you said, but an important thing that Pierre did today is he did not call Carney a liar. because that's very aggressive, and that's the old style, Pierre. He's a liar. He lied to you. No. He just came out and he talked about the facts, that it was basically it was a hidden tax. He didn't mention that Carney said it was going to be a hidden tax, but he just concentrated on the issue rather than an ad hominem attack on the man.
Right. And he also said further in that clip, he also said to Carney, he's like, please steal this idea. Please take this idea. We will support it. Right. Which is, again, that's his way of saying, look,
very different
right,
tone.
very different tone. And the other thing that I've noticed that I've actually come to appreciate is the backdrop that they're choosing. Right.
Yeah.
Pierre,
even the foreground was plain. It didn't have a slogan atop the top of the Canadian flag, which was an important difference.
Right. So they can accuse him of being just like Trump, and they can accuse him of just being somebody filled with slogans. And the maple leaf is just, it embodies our country, right?
Yeah.
And he's got the Canadian flag lapel that I see he's wearing more often. But yeah, that's that. That's one issue. I think that settles that. I think the biggest issue of the week, and we saw it because we saw it in the viewership of our TikToks and our YouTube videos, is self-defense, right?
Crime.
Last week crime. We had talked about Canada needing to implement some sort of reasonable castle law. And so today, Pierre Poilievre just dropped what he's calling the Stand on Guard law. For the first time, Canada could see its own version of a castle law, a law that would let Canadians defend their homes and their families without going to jail, which is crazy to say. But right now, we're going to watch another video of him making this announcement today, and then I'm going to get your reaction on the other side.
Code. Let's listen in.
After 10 years of Liberals, the system treats victims like criminals and criminals like victims. Back in 2019, 3 masked intruders, one armed with a sawed-off shotgun, broke into a residence in Collingwood. Cameron Gardner and his girlfriend were tied up. When they finally freed themselves, they struggled with the intruders. The attacker's gun went off twice, striking 2 of the attackers. One escaped. Now, when Cameron saw the police arrive, he was relieved until he found out that they were going to put him in handcuffs.
Unbelievable.
He'd fought for his life. He was courageous. And this is the price he paid. He was in jail for 6 months. He was in a legal process for over 2 years, spending an ungodly fortune on lawyers. And then there's Ali Mian. In February of 2023, the Milton residence and licensed firearms owner awoke to find five intruders who were masked and armed. They came in, broke into his house, carrying weapons, zip ties, and harmed his mother. After using his legal firearm to shoot one of the intruders, he was able to fight them off. But he was arrested. By the way, one of the intruders had a 9mm handgun. And yet, the law went after this innocent man trying to defend his home. He had to post $130,000 in bail for defending his family. After 5 months of hell, the second-degree murder charge was finally dropped by the Crown because they realized there was no reasonable chance of conviction. But it is outrageous that this man had to live through that hell when he should have been focused on recovering from the trauma of fighting off a dangerous criminal. And that is why Conservatives are standing here today, based on the principle that your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law, failing which one of our party's MPs will put forward such a bill. It will amend Section 34.2 of the Criminal Code, which right now says that you can defend yourself based on 9 very complicated and vague conditions. Now, look, if you're defending your house, you don't have time to think through 9 different conditions.
Where's what I said last week?
to protect yourself and your kids. And it is wrong for the law, for the police, and for judges to apply a complicated, indecipherable legal doctrine against you when you were only doing what is right. Our amendment instead will change section 34.2 of the Criminal Code to say that the use of force, including lethal force, is presumed reasonable against an individual who unlawfully enters a house and poses a threat to the safety of anyone inside. The proposed amendment is reasonable.
What's your immediate reaction?
Well, I know what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy a copy of the Criminal Code. I could have beside my bed, and I'm going to hold it up when they start shooting at me. No. It's about time, you know? And he didn't mention the case last week in Lindsay, Ontario, where the person intruded upon was also charged. You know, it's crazy. There's no common sense. And one thing I learned about the law when I worked for the Canada's Minister of Justice is that the feeling then was the law should be common sense based. And it goes back to an older British tradition of common law, which preceded parliamentary law. So common law is largely based on common sense. This is not a common sense law. And we need to, and Pierre is right, and so are some liberals I've talked to who support this, that it's time for a little common sense.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it goes back to what I was saying last week. If somebody breaks into our house and, you know, my first thought is not about whether I'm going to go to jail or the mathematical calculations of is this proportional or is this reasonable or whatever the wording happens to be in the criminal code. It's what do I got to do to protect my family? And it's like you just said, it's common sense, right? If somebody breaks into your home, you need the ability, and not just physically, but legally, you need the latitude to be able to neutralize that threat. And, you know, reasonable people are not going to say, let's use a double barrel shotgun every time. What people just want to be able to do is protect their family. And it's outrageous that we live in a country so great as Canada, and we're the laughing stock of the world. There was an American podcast that I listened to this week that they were picking this up. And they're like, this is just outrageous, right? The Americans are laughing at us, right? Because we can't protect our own family. And the other thing that I'll point out too is he calls it the stand on guard law. Mm-hmm. And at a time where our country is feeling patriotic for, I'll say, bullshit reasons, in my opinion, this is actually real, right? He's using patriotism to say we need to put a bill forward in Parliament to amend the criminal code. And he also went on to say that he wants Mark Carney to steal his idea again. So, and if you look at the video here, I didn't see this angle when I listened to it when I was at work today, so I didn't get to see it. But this backdrop here, again, Canadian flag in the background,
yeah.
Maple leaf on the podium.
Without a slogan.
Right. And the other thing that I was thinking about watching this video is the children in the background, right? Right now, if somebody broke into their bedroom in the middle of the night, their parents don't have the ability to protect their children without fear of them going to jail.
Yeah.
So look,
well, they would
and if
anyway.
Mark,
I mean, most parents would anyway.
Right. And the other thing is too, look, if the liberals, if they adopt this and they vote for it, they're only going to get claps from me, right? I'm not going to play partisan politics with this issue. And if Mark Carney steals some of these ideas, then maybe it can help him. But I think, yeah, is there anything else you have to add or?
Well, you know, Ford also raised it again this week. Second time in 2 weeks. And Ford has become Canada's populist, in my view. He is no longer conservative or liberal. He listens to the public, and he makes a virtue out of it. People can phone him anytime. He goes around to their house. That's the same as his brother used to do. And listening to the public is not an evil thing. You know, the old style liberals are the Trudeau liberals who kind of distorted the meaning of true liberalism, started dissing all over populists. Well, populists are only listening to the people, in my view. And Pierre is joining forward on that too. At a certain point, what the people want is what they're going to want to elect the politicians to do.
Right. That's great. Well, you know what? We'll keep following this story because we know that this is an important issue to, the majority of Canadians, and hopefully Parliament can get its act together. I hope it's a unanimous vote if this bill gets to the floor. Not holding my breath, but I hope it's unanimous. That would be a great sign for the country. So let's move on. I mean, the economic outlook in Canada has been pretty grim in the past few months. The next topic we're going to talk about is a report from CIBC Economics that found that youth unemployment has reached recessionary levels. And that's not just a statistic. That's like a red flag waving, telling us that, we're failing our young people. It means that, a generation of future leaders, really, future innovators are going to suffer at the lack of opportunity. Because even in my life and in your life, Ian, that first job, no matter what it is, it'll teach you the value of hard work, and it provides you a foundation to have a good start in adulthood. So let's take a look at this video that I'm going to queue up, and then I'll get your reaction again on the other side.
TV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
Negative winds are blowing with youth unemployment worse than we thought. According to a new report, it's at recessionary levels. That's not good. And it means that those between the ages of 15 and 24 are really having a tough time finding work. We sent CTV's Adrian Gobrio to check out whether this is just a blip or here to stay. Adrian?
Sandy, I'm here inside a Youth Employment Services office where the CEO tells me people are arriving in droves, desperate for work. And now one of Canada's largest banks says the increase in youth unemployment has surpassed levels we normally see during a recession, and the troubling trend could linger. CIBC Capital Markets has shared that unemployment for those aged 15 to 24 has increased by more than 5.5% since 2022. The average uptick in youth unemployment during a recession typically has been around 4%.
It is unusual to see this level of youth unemployment when the economy is not in an outright recession, and it seemed to have started before the economy really slowed. Part of it is tied to AI, artificial.
Okay, sorry, that's enough of that person there. Okay, I couldn't take that. After he said we're not really in a recession, I had to turn it off. Okay. Anyways,
we are in a recession. We are in a
recession.
And as I said last week, the last people to tell you that is the government. You can see it on the street. You can see it talking to your neighbors. Especially if you're talking to neighbors who have young children who cannot find a job. Part of the problem, and it has nothing to do with the AI, it has nothing to do with tariffs. What it has to do with is our immigration policy. And, we have to turn off the spigots. Carney has not done that. Allowed 1 million new people into Canada last year. We're going to hit that same target this year. There's no housing and there's no jobs for those people. In the past, when my family immigrated to Canada, there was a gradual immigration system, and you had to prove that you were going to be a contributor to the Canadian economy, that you had people who were going to support you when you got here, and then you were going to get a job within a certain amount of time. Those rules have all gone. It's helping destroy not only our economy, but our chances for our own young people.
I would also look at it from another perspective, and I've explained this to a lot of people. I said, look, this is not just about, Canadians losing out on opportunities. There used to be a promise of this country that you could come from any country. You can be from the most war-torn, poor nations. You can come to this country, and if you work hard, then you can get ahead. And if it's not happening for Canadians, then how can we promise good, decent, hardworking people that come to Canada every year for a better life, that life is better over here? Because what I hear and what I see is people are also leaving this country. Mm-hmm. Because there aren't opportunities anymore, right? So, and look, for me, like the first job that I ever had was in a warehouse, and it was sweeping floors, and it was hard work. It was a dusty warehouse environment, and I had help getting that job. But once I got that job, I busted my ass off. Then I was able to use that, and I got my first full-time or part-time job at McDonald's. And I built up character skills, being able to tolerate high amounts of stress, being able to interact with people. I got a good paycheck for the age that I was at. And that prepared me for the trades, because when I went into the trades, small things that would bother normal people didn't bother me. I can operate under extremely stressful, time-sensitive tasks because of my first vital job. And if we take away that opportunity from young people, we are really going to be troubled as a nation, because you can't just pick somebody out of high school, or so you can't pick somebody out of college and just drop them into the workforce. So I think that we're failing our young people. I think that there are a lot of issues that contribute to it. And I just hope, again, I hope that all of Parliament can come together and figure something out about that. Do you have anything else to add, or is that it?
Well, a couple of things. First, I want to make it clear that I'm not anti-immigrant, and neither are you, because all of our forebears were all immigrants. But the times were different, and you had to come prepared to become independent. And, and what you've described, my first job in university up in Ottawa was shoveling snow in the winter on a snow crew, because I didn't have my license, and in the summer digging ditches for Ottawa Gas. You do what you have to do to get the money, in my case, to pay my way through university, because my father was a deceased war veteran, and my mother had 3 children that she couldn't afford to send to university.
Right. And hard work, busting your back and busting your balls to pay your way through college or to save up to buy a home. That's a part of the promise of this country, is that you work your butt off, you do the right things, and then in the future you'll be able to buy a home, or you'll be able to have a successful career. And I think if we're failing our youth, we're just failing everybody at that point. And we're also failing immigrants too. So
yes.
But I take your point. I take your point. Obviously, immigration in the past has been a very divisive issue because of the previous prime minister. He used it to divide our country based on race, based on class, based on everything. But now we have a different prime minister. And I hope that Mark Carney will be able to laser focus this country and try and manage this crisis, because he's got crises all around him. And I'm rooting for this country to be able to come out on top.
Well, I'm going to give Carney some kudos here, because in a number of instances, he's throwing Trudeau under the bus, and quite deservedly. Just in the Mexico example, the two ministers that went down and got rebuffed go back to when Trudeau said on the way out the door that Canada should get its own trade agreement with the United States and forget about Mexico. And that's when he flew down to Mar-a-Lago. And that didn't work out well for Trudeau, because Trump hates him. But the point is that Trudeau embarrassed Mexico after we had spent many months negotiating a tripartite agreement twice with Mexico, U.S., and Canada. And the premier, or the president of Mexico, has every right to be pissed off. Now, Carney is going to Mexico in the middle of next month, and he is going to personally tell Mexico that there's a new sheriff in town, and he will throw Trudeau under the bus again for his stupid comment that we should ignore Mexico and just make our own deal with the United States.
Right.
The final thing I want to say on this is that young people are the ones who voted in large numbers for the Conservatives in the last election. And if we're going to have an election next year, which I expect, they're not going to be happy that they don't have jobs. And, more of them, I think, will vote for the other party next election.
Right. And I think the danger that they run into, just generally, the left generally, not just in Canada, but America, because that shift happened in America, it bore out in the results. But the risk that the left runs is that block of youth will be a permanent, reliable voting bloc for the right. And so that's what I have to say on that. You're right. I agree with you. But let's take a look at this quick video. We were just talking about, Carney sent Trudeau's ministers, his ministers, to Mexico, and it was failed. It failed. So let's listen into this video.
Nicholas Keeley joins me now, long-term Liberal. You know Mexico. You know the president of Mexico.
Yes.
Canada sent 2 of its recycled ministers down to Mexico recently, Anand and Champagne. And from what I understood, they sort of got the bums boot out of there. They said, we want a separate deal. And the president of Mexico rightly said, no, forget it.
Well,
Tell me what you know.
Well, I don't know. I do know this. I think we tend to think here that because we're sort of just like the Americans, that we're on par with the Americans in terms of our understanding and our ability to understand politics.
Right.
And I'd say, too, that, she's a new president. So maybe they thought, well, I've been in politics for 10 years, says Champagne. I've been in politics for 10 years, says Anand. I have a global perspective. I've done stuff on industry. I've done stuff on national defense, et cetera, et cetera.
We're going to teach her how to do it.
And what I think happened here was, and I've said this to my friends, I think that Champagne, Anand, and Canada got schooled by a very, very well
you don't
educated
say.
And a very well political president of Mexico. She said, point blank, my deal for this is the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. So don't come down here and try to tell me that you want to do something behind Donald Trump's back. Don't try to tell me that we're going to triangulate around the United States by having something where we could do another country and we work to do something behind the United States. Don't try to tell me that I'm going to undercut my relationship with the United States when they're my biggest trading partner, says President Sheinbaum.
So you can do caught out.
I think there's a couple of things that I'm concerned about. One would be that maybe we didn't have the right intel going down there. And I don't know who's at fault for this. Or secondly, that we didn't read the tea leaves well. She's a very smart politician. I think I can tell you we're doing some great work in Mexico. And I've never seen really decent, in-depth understanding of politics like I have right now in Mexico.
Okay, so that was Mark Keeley. Very close to, I guess, the Prime Minister, knows what's going on. Steve Ledrew, very great journalist. Again, a guy who was on, you recognize from CP24, I believe it was. And now he's gone into the podcasting space. Ian, what do you think about what Mark Keeley had to say?
Well, I know Mark Keeley, and I've known him for years. And he used to work for John Turner when I was up in Ottawa when Turner was Prime Minister as well. And he knows what he's talking about. He knows it from the inside, and the Canadian government acted differently before Trudeau. All of the parties, all of the prime ministers treated Mexico with the respect that they deserve, treated the tripartite agreement, as we talked about, with the respect that it deserved, and participated in it. This going behind Trump's back for political reasons is not going to work.
It's stupid. It's moronic. It's idiotic. It's all of the above. It just makes absolutely no sense.
They're
Donald
our biggest
Trump
trading partner too. Same as Mexico.
Right. Look, Donald Trump is a lot of things, but he's not stupid, right? He has people that will come to him and say, look, the Canadians are trying to stiff you over, Mr. President. And then he probably, press the Diet Coke button, smashes his fist on the table and says, get that guy on the phone. But this is so stupid. And look, it's counterproductive. And look, last year at this exact time, leading up to the American election, when Kamala was just starting to get her steam, everybody was wondering, where's Trump? What's Trump doing? Well, I'll tell you what he was doing. He was crafting his policies, and he foresaw that countries might try and band together and try and overcome him, but it hasn't worked. So we'll move on from that. We're getting near the end. I think we're going to go a little bit past our time, but that's okay. We'll just keep going. A bunch of Canadian ministers